The Lives of the Saints by the Reverend Alban Butler, taken from the 4th edition, published in 1954. August 3rd. The Finding of the Relics of St. Stephen. This second festival, in honor of the holy protomartyr St. Stephen, was instituted by the Church on the occasion of the discovery of his precious remains. His body lay long concealed, whilst the glory of his sanctity shone both in heaven and on earth. The very remembrance of the place of his burial had been blotted out of the minds of men, and his relics lay covered under the ruins of an old tomb in a place 20 miles from Jerusalem, called Gamala, that is, borough of Gamaliel, where stood a church which was served by a venerable priest named Lucian. In the year 415, in the 10th consulship of Honorius and the 6th of Theodosius the Younger, on Friday the 3rd of December, about 9 o'clock at night, Lucian was sleeping in his bed in the baptistry, where he commonly lay, in order to guard the sacred vessels of the church. Being half awake, he saw a tall, comely old man of a venerable aspect, with a long white beard, clothed in a white garment, edged with the small plates of gold, marked with crosses, and holding a golden wand in his hand. This person approached Lucian, and calling him thrice by his name, bid him to go to Jerusalem and to tell Bishop John to come and open the tombs in which his remains and those of certain other saints of Christ lay, that through their means God might open to many the gates of his clemency. Lucian asked his name. "I am," said he, "Gamaliel, who instructed Paul the apostle in the law, and on the east side of the monument lieth Stephen, who was stoned by the Jews without the north gate. His body was left there, exposed one day and one night, but was not touched by birds or beasts. I exhorted the faithful to carry it off in the night time, which, when they had done, I caused it to be carried secretly to my house in the country, where I celebrated his funeral rites 40 days, and then caused his body to be laid in my own tomb to the eastward. Nicodemus, who came to Jesus by night, lieth there in another coffin. He was excommunicated by the Jews for following Christ, and banished out of Jerusalem. Whereupon I received him into my house in the country, and there maintained him to the end of his life. After his death I buried him honorably near Stephen. I likewise buried there my son, Abibas, who died before me at the age of 20 years. His body is in the third coffin, which stands higher up, where I myself was also interred after my death. My wife Ethna and my eldest son Semelius, who were not willing to embrace the faith of Christ, were buried in another ground, called Kafar Semelia. Lucian, fearing to pass for an impostor if he was too credulous, prayed that if the vision was from God, he might be favored with it a second and a third time, and he continued to fast on bread and water. On the Friday following, Gamaliel appeared again to him, in the same form as before, and commanded him to obey. As emblems of the relics he brought and showed Lucian 4 baskets, 3 of gold and 1 of silver. The golden baskets were full of roses, 2 of white and 1 of red roses. The silver basket was full of saffron of a most delicious smell. Lucian asked what these were. Gamaliel said, "They are our relics. The red roses represent Stephen, who lieth at the entrance of the sepulchre. The second basket Nicodemus, who is near the door. The silver basket represents my son Abibas, who departed this life without stain. His basket is contiguous to mine." Having said this, he disappeared. Lucian then awaked, gave thanks to God, and continued his fasts. In the 3rd week, on the same day, and at the same hour, Gamaliel appeared again to him, and with threats upbraided him with his neglect, adding that the drought which then afflicted the world would be removed only by his obedience and the discovery of their relics. Lucian, being now terrified, promised he would no longer defer it. After this last vision he repaired to Jerusalem, and laid the whole affair before Bishop John, who wept for joy, and bid him go and search for the relics, which the bishop concluded would be found under a heap of small stones, which lay in a field near his church. Lucian said he imagined the same thing, and returning to his borough, summoned the inhabitants to meet the next day in the morning, in order to search under the heap of stones. As Lucian was going the morning following to see the place dug up, he was met by Megetius, a monk of a pure and holy life, who told him that Gamaliel had appeared to him, and bade him inform Lucian that they labored in vain in that place. "We were laid there," said he, "at the time of our funeral obsequies, according to the ancient custom, and that heap of stones was a mark of the mourning of our friends. Search elsewhere, in a place called the Battalia." In effect, said Megetius, continuing the relation of his vision, "I found myself of a sudden in the same field where I saw a neglected ruinous tomb, and in it 3 beds, adorned with gold. In one of them, more elevated than the others, lay 2 men, an old man and a young one, and one in each of the other beds. Lucian, having heard Majestius's report, praised God for having another witness of his revelation, and, having removed to no purpose the heap of stones, went to the other place. In digging up the earth here, 3 coffins or chests were found, as above mentioned, whereon were engraved these words in very large characters: Sheliel, Nasuam, Gamaliel Abibas. The 2 first are the Syriac names of Stephen, or crowned, and Nicodemus, or victory of the people. Lucian sent immediately to acquaint Bishop John with this. He was then at the council of Diospolis, and taking along with him Eutonius, bishop of Sebaste, and Eutharius, bishop of Jericho, came to the place. Upon the opening of St. Stephen's coffin, the earth shook, and there came out of the coffin such an agreeable odor that no one remembered to have ever smelt anything like it. There was a vast multitude of people assembled in that place, among whom were many persons afflicted with divers distempers, of whom 73 recovered their health upon the spot. Some were freed from evil spirits, others cured of scrofulous tumors of various kinds, others of fevers, fistulas, the bloody flux, the falling sickness, headaches, and pains in the bowels. They kissed the holy relics and then shut them up. The bishop claimed those of St. Stephen for the church of Jerusalem, of which he had been deacon. The rest were left at Capharmagala. The protomartyr's body was reduced to dust, excepting the bones, which were whole and in their natural situation. The bishop consented to leave a small portion of them at Capharmagama. The rest were carried in the coffin, with singing of psalms and hymns, to the church of Sion at Jerusalem. At the time of this translation there fell a great deal of rain, which refreshed the country after a long drought. The translation was performed on the 26th of December, on which day the Church hath ever since honored the memory of St. Stephen, commemorating the discovery of his relics on the 3rd of August, probably on account of the dedication of some church in honor of St. Stephen, perhaps that of Ancona. The history of this miraculous discovery in translation, written by Lucian himself, and translated into Latin by Avitus, a Spanish priest, native of Braga, then living at Jerusalem, an intimate friend of St. Jerome, is published by the Benedictine monks in the appendix to the 7th tome of the works of St. Austin. This account is also attested by Chrysippus, an eminent and holy priest of the Church of Jerusalem, whose virtue is highly commended by the judicious author of the life of St. Euthemius, by Aedatius and Marcellinus in their chronicles, by Basil, bishop of Seleucia, St. Austin, St. Bede, etc. It is mentioned by most of the historians and in the sermons of the principal fathers of that age. St. Stephen's body remained in the church of Sion till the Empress Eudocia, wife of Theodosius the Younger, going a second time to Jerusalem in 444, built a stately church to God in his honor, about a furlong from the city, near the spot where he was stoned to death, into which she procured his body to be translated, and in which she was buried herself after her death in 461. St. Austin, speaking of the miracles of St. Stephen, addresses himself to his flock as follows: "Let us so desire to obtain temporal blessings by his intercession, that we may merit in imitating him those which are eternal." Our corporal necessities were not the motive which drew our omnipotent physician down from heaven, but the spiritual miseries of our souls. In his mortal life he restored many sick to their health, and delivered demoniacs, to give men a sensible proof of his divine power, and for an emblem that he came to relieve the spiritual miseries of our soul, and to put an end to the empire of the devil over them. In like manner, when through his servants he has bestowed corporal blessings on men, he excites our confidence in his mercy to ask through their intercession his invisible graces. We ought to pray for our daily bread, or all necessary supplies of our bodily necessities, but should make these petitions subordinate to the great end of our sanctification, and his divine honor, offering them under this condition, as we know not in temporal blessings what is most expedient for us. God offers us his grace, his love, himself. Him we must make the great and ultimate end of all our requests to him. If some rich prince should engage himself to grant us whatever we should ask, it would be putting an affront upon him if we confined our petition to pins or such trifles, as St. Teresa remarks.